A warm welcome from me to you all. Hope you are fit for the day. And yes, my name is Heiko Müller, as Peter saw. I'm a project and account manager from HEC, and we are dealing with, with XR technology, mixed reality projects for our clients from architecture, from industries like automotive, from e-commerce, and so on. And I'm proud to introduce to present the keynote speech from Stephanie. In this keynote, Stephanie will introduce us to her new and diametrical theory of narration for the immersive experience. We will see how theory and, I believe, practice of storytelling are brought together, and how Stephanie implements her new narrative paradigm, her new narrative philosophy in her work as creative director and experiential at Refinery 29. I'm excited to see how you bring the strings together and how this is done in collaboration with big companies like Facebook, Amazon, I read Netflix, and so on, who they bring their brands to life. Stephanie is recognized as a virtual reality pioneer. She's a creative director of experimental at Refinery 29, and there she has developed 29 rooms. Immersive funhouse of course and creativity, and the aim is to bring the brands and products to life in unique, interactive, immersive experience. She spoke around the world at many conferences like Tribeca Film Festival, I've read, IEEE Digital Media Summit, and the long list of speeches you held. She's the author of The End of Storytelling, and in her book she discussed the importance of overcoming traditional storytelling ideas for the future of narrative branding across industry boundaries. It's a must for everyone who wants to tell stories with immersive technologies. And in the last days I saw you talk on YouTube from the February, and I was very impressed by the paradigm shift you described about. And I think it's not only interesting, it's very important for our three-dimensional digital world. And so everybody have fun, and again, a warm welcome to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's see if I get this clicker right. I did it. I went backwards. Yeah, I knew it. You told me I was going to do that. All right. Wonderful. Good morning. Wasn't sure if I was going to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, AC. Thank you, MediaTech Hub. Germany is actually quite special to me for a very specific reason. I was studying at Carnegie Mellon University. I went in as a theater major, and as a directing major, you learn not just directing for theater, but you also study choreography and art movements and music. And the composer that I studied was Wagner. And I remember, and this will date me now, going and grabbing the Tannhauser CD and going to the library where you have the CD and you sit in your little listening station and just being overcome for 15 minutes by this incredible overture. And it was so powerful to me that many years later, when, it kind of felt like this explosion of energy, but years later when I had my son and I packed my bags for the hospital, I also packed a Tannhauser CD, and my son was born into this world to Wagner. So, true story. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you very much. My background at Carnegie Mellon, just to give you some perspective on where I'm coming from here, is that I went in as a theater major, and I studied directing, and I failed my first computer science class, because at Carnegie Mellon, even a theater major has to learn computer science. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand functionality of it, but ultimately, I came back and I learned how coding was like telling a story. And ultimately, I ended up getting a degree both from the School of Drama as a directing major, from the School of Computer Science in the area of human-computer interaction, went on to be part of the Masters of Entertainment Technology program. And this balance of narrative and technology has persisted throughout my life, whether I was developing at Intel or working as a Disney Imagineer, as a film producer with documentaries and different types of films, but then also as this consumer viable version of virtual reality came back around, going back in and doing research, leading research at the Blended Reality Group at Yale, working with the Future Realities Lab with Ken Perlin at NYU, and also working with a lot of different companies to bring their visions to life. And ultimately, now at Refinery 29. Refinery 29 has a Berlin office, but how many people are familiar with it? Oh, amazing. Okay, great. And I'll talk a little bit about 29 rooms too, but going back to why we're here, talking to a room full of storytellers about the end of storytelling. Bold move at 10 o'clock in the morning, guys. Nice. Hopefully, what I talk about today will be something that you can take with you, not just in why storytelling doesn't work, but how to think immersively, and some practical tips on moving forward with your own projects. So, all right, in the vein of starting a thing about ending storytelling with a story, and now going backwards to look at the future, specifically 1938, New York, Queens. So 1938, there's a young man named Chester Carlton. Chester Carlton has graduated from Caltech. He's been reading up on Einstein's papers. He's a clerk at a patent office. And at the patent office, they make lots of copies. Now, the process for making copies in 1938 was a very long process, right? It was a photographic process. So you have your paper, you collate it, you give it to a courier, the courier takes it to a Photoshop, they take a picture, they let it dry, they collate it back to you, and they send it back. So you're talking days to make a copy, right? Chester realized that you could actually make a copy instantaneously using electrophotography. So instead of it being a photographic process, now it's a process of light, electricity, and powder. And so he takes this concept to all the major institutions. You've got Eastman Kodak, IBM, General Electric, the US government, and he goes in front of them and he creates a copy. Instantaneously. It's crude, right? Like, this isn't our copies of today. But he shows that it functionally works. Now, when he's sitting in that room at IBM, what happens? What do you imagine happens? This table of brilliant scientists looking at this and watching him turn this out. What happens? They all stand up and they walk out without saying a word. Why? They were unprepared for the possibility of a radically different approach. So this is, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Copernicus heliocentric theory, right? Another example of a paradigm where everyone was so convinced that the Earth was the center of the world, they had these elaborate models of why the weird rotations worked and didn't work, but that was the way that we understood the world to be. At the center, right? A well-integrated paradigm can become so convincing that even the possibility of alternatives seems absurd. This is where we are right now with storytelling. We are so familiar with storytelling that we take other words and we put them on top of it. It's immersive storytelling, right? It's a film, but it's VR film. It's a 360 film. Like, we see these paradigms happened throughout history, throughout time. The first car, a horseless carriage. Would you like to see my horseless carriage? You know, it was now we still call cars by horsepower, right? We have these vestiges of the past. But to truly step into what the potential is for this medium, we need to be moving forward. We need to be thinking differently, and we need to be able to not be blinded by what has been successful, not be so convinced by what you already know to think that that is exactly what's going to happen here. In fact, throughout time, technology inevitably alters what's possible, and then that expands our perception of what's possible, right? So let's go for the expansion. Let's go for what's next. Let's look at where we're headed. So, all right, but if you're with me here, let's take a look about why it doesn't work. And I think to some degree, many of us have experienced why it doesn't work. All right. Aha. Beirut. I can't even pronounce it, but the Festival House, right? So here's a picture of something that's classical storytelling. This is a storytelling medium, and it's got two things in here that are essential to storytelling that do not work in immersive environments. Anybody have a guess? Yes. There's no interaction. Yep, you have your audience in the seats, like they're a nice passive audience sitting there waiting to receive, but they're sitting here waiting to receive from, and this is the key, this frame, this proscenium. This frame that has been around forever, it's so ubiquitous now, we forget, we don't realize that it's every screen, it's every phone, it's the menu, the piece of paper that you're writing on. This frame separates our reality from our created content, and it always has, as far as we're concerned. We're so used to it that we don't even think about it anymore. It's that established paradigm. So let's take a look at what happens. You know, we've got this paradigm. We've been working on this for a while. So we built a process to support this frame. Whether we're making a film, a play, a video to go on YouTube, we've got this medium that contains the narrative, right? And to put something into this medium, we've got our author who constructs our narrative to fit nicely into there, whatever that interaction is. And then, yes, we have our audience who witnesses the narrative. This process is ingrained. So what happens when we take this away and we put people into an experience, whether it's location-based or in a headset or augmented and mixed reality? What happens when we do this is ultimately that process gets shuffled around, it gets moved around, right? It doesn't work. We run into all kinds of usability challenges, and we're trying to figure out why the planets go in different directions because we know that the Earth is in the middle, right? Our tendency is to take somebody and say, okay, we know our audience. What we're going to do, we're going to take what we already know and we're just going to put it on their head and they can look around. They can walk around. But I'm going to have my script because I understand my script. But what we end up seeing, the number of times, like they defer to established viewing habits. The number of times somebody gets into a headset, looks straight forward, and doesn't move, and you can turn around and look, right, in a VR headset, right? They feel overwhelmed. We see a lot of cognitive dissonance and inability to absorb information, whether you're the competition between what you're hearing and what you're seeing, this fear of missing out. The first time I saw one of Chris Milk's Evolution of Verse, which kind of landslid VR into entertainment content, there's a scene where this train comes barreling through. And it's meant to be this homage to the Lumiere brothers and, this climactic moment. I was looking the other way. Like, I didn't even see it coming, right? We don't have this control because, but he had constructed this narrative. And this narrative of this happens, this happens, this happens, without considering what happens when you take that frame away, and potentially I'm not looking at that. So we know why. We start to look at why it's not working. So then what do we do about this, right? What does it mean to think immersively? What does it mean to work in narratives in a different way? How do we even start? So it's nice to point out the problem, but come on, give us something to work with, right? The idea of putting somebody from taking the classical tradition and putting it into the way that we think and process there, I call this the square mentality. This is all of our framed mediums. Here, and I'm going to look at some of the traits of some of this square mentality. When you're thinking in a square mentality, just check yourself. And the next time you're thinking about developing immersively, say, am I using these words? Is this the way that I'm thinking? But in a square mentality, we have a frame, right? We've established we're working in a framed medium, whatever that is. Generally, what ends up happening is it's an audiovisual dominant progression, right? That's where our story starts. With what do they say and what do they do? We start writing, we start crafting, because we know what we're going to put into the frame. We can control that. We have our audience, which is passive, and there to absorb the information in a linear direction, because even in a game, even if you're talking about gaming, that has all been pre-scripted. Even if we're watching Bandersnatch and we're choosing one or the other, that has all been pre-scripted. It is still linear, even though it's branching linear. And who's putting this together is generally what we call a director, someone who's directing attention, right? Now, I call stepping into immersive thinking the spherical mentality. Let's see if it'll go. If we're not working in a frame in an immersive environment, what are we working in? Interactive. Come on, good morning. I know, we got to get the coffee going. But if we're not working in a frame, what are we working in? Working in a world, right? It's an environment that you're stepping into. Not this, right? Perfect. Thank you. Yes. And if we aren't starting with audio-visual, and this is key to immersive thinking when you're approaching your next project, what are we starting with? If the Earth isn't the center of the world, what is? It's psychological. It is the experience, what plays into the experience, right? So one of the key foundations of human-computer interaction is human psychology, right? And the reason that we do things and the way that we create experiences so that we're minimizing user error, so that we're enhancing a positive experience, it comes down to the psychology. And we miss this when we're working in an audiovisual medium because we're not starting where our guests are starting. And I do say guests very deliberately, because if you think about who's in your space, an audience is very passive, right? A user is somebody who's using a device deliberately. What's another one that we call them? Participants. Maybe they don't want to participate. But a guest, somebody, we're welcoming them into our space. We're thinking about how they're thinking. We're accommodating them. Starting with the psychology is incredibly important in immersive thinking. And then we also move from something that's passive into having agency. The ability to move. There are varying degrees of agency, but we're aware of this and we're accommodating this, going back to our psychological foundation of why and how people are in that space. Linear, and I think that we're at the very early stages of this, and we'll watch technology progress, and this will become extremely interesting, is as we move from linear, we'll move into a dynamic plot lines, dynamically created plot lines that are, and I know I've heard a lot of great information about AI being used for data mining and data resourcing. Using machine learning also as a means of driving narrative is going to become very, very important. So we've got all this, we're thinking this square mentality, and we're building this immersive world, and who's doing this? If it's not the director, what kind of person is, how do we describe this? Yeah? The user themselves? Well, they're not using, right? They're setting the tone, they're setting the look and the feel, they're creating the world that we are moving people through using our psychological tricks. They're creating. Well, the audience is moving, but the audience doesn't, and I think this is an interesting point because the audience doesn't control what the look and feel is. They don't set the tone. They aren't picking where the lighting is necessarily. So saying that the audience is the director, I think is also can be a potential misnomer, but I do think we have here the potential for a creator. If you think of yourself as a creator, as someone that's putting together these forces to move people through an experience, you are now in a different mindset and an immersive thinking mindset. So, let's see. Sorry. Oh, stand here. Bam. All right, so what does this look like? I'm a visual person. Everybody's familiar with Freytag's pyramid, right? This is what we're used to as our storyteller, that we're writing our narratives. We've got our exposition, rising action. So if this is what the square mentality looks like, then what does the spherical mentality look like? This is actually an animation that moves in like fractal integrations, but if you can imagine this, suddenly we have a dynamic relationship that's happening, and this is where we are. This is where we are with immersive narratives. We are creating a complex interwoven network of story, technology, humanity. I call this the storyplex. It's a network, it's active, it's dynamic. These are the core components that come together, and without each of those, if we're just looking at the story and the only thing we're paying attention to is the story or the technology, and most of the time we forget about the human psychology aspect of it, then we're working with the square mindset. All right, so let's look at this. So this is a scene from 29 Rooms, and you can kind of play around with like the narrative elements. So the narrative one, we're really talking like your Aristotelian poetics, your plot, your characters, your spectacle. We play around with these narrative elements as more of constructs than as linear progressions, right? And then from the narrative, how that is impacted, and it's fluid based on what the different technology is that we're using. That technology can be VR, it can be AR, it can be lights, it can be music. What is the technology? How are you using that? How does that impact your story? And ultimately, how it all comes together is through, again, the social constructs that are already in place when people come into the experience, which is what we're working against right now with the framed mindset of current guests. So I'm going to dive into a very specific example here from 29 Rooms, which we just launched in Los Angeles with Facebook Spark AR. But for those of you who are not familiar with 29 Rooms, let me give you a quick preview. our immersive world of cause and creativity. Now, we've worked with brands from Facebook to Reebok, to Amazon, to Revlon, to Disney, and they've come in here with this expectation and of knowing that we're not doing a traditional story, right? It's not like you're not coming in and we're going to walk through and I'm going to tell you my brand story. It's different. You're experiencing it. We've got these narrative constructs we'll extract from what the story is that they're trying to tell, but then we put it in front of our guests in a way that is meaningful, in a way that is interactive, and in a way that allows them to own the story. And it's worked. 29 Rooms has reached over half of all Instagram users worldwide. That's stunning. So, what makes it successful? I think a lot of making it successful is stepping back and saying, we aren't doing things the way that have been done before. We're taking the story to a different level. So, I've got a quick little peek behind the curtain of our collaboration with Spark AR. Is everybody familiar with Spark AR? So Spark AR is it's in Instagram. It's actually, I don't know if it's here, but it's in Instagram, and you can go in, and a lot of times up till now they've been face filters, where you hold it up and you get turned into the Night King, or you can create your own filters and put on. It's a very light lift, and what I love about this, and what I love about being at Refinery 29, is that having worked in academia and having developed some of the coolest stuff around, it's hard to get it into people's hands, right? And that's the next level for this industry, right? If we can't get people using this, if we can't get people excited about this, we're not going to have an industry. I already watched the VR industry implode once, right? I don't want to see it happen again. So we're taking something that Facebook is traditionally known for face filters and saying, how do we make this exciting? How do we make this something that people go, I can't believe that you can do that in augmented reality. You don't have to download anything extra. You don't have to build anything. We're going to set this up for you as an experience that blows your mind with what's possible. So we put together, I'll do kind of a quick touch point because I don't know how much time we have left, but to kind of show how all of this comes together. We put together this concept of the Mirage and worked with a London-based artist, Lucy Hardcastle. And in the Mirage, the idea is that we explore both the physical world and the digital world and how they intertwine and ultimately come together in augmented reality. So going back to our narrative elements, our technology, and our psychology, let's see how these all come together for this experience. One of the first things that we did is saying, okay, so that's our high-level experience. That's our high-level narrative umbrella that we're working with. But we're not going to start by writing a script, right? We're going to start by looking at what are the different elements that are going to come together, the narrative elements that are going to come together, how the technology is going to support that, and then we'll back into, and the psychology, and then we'll back into developing the narrative around it. So we outlined our key components. One was a guide that was physically in the space. I think right now, especially with technology, having those touch points is very important on a narrative level. We went through a journey and said, potentially, what is the psychological journey? This is not a script. What is the psychological journey from beginning to end that the guest is going through? Lucy created these incredible characters that we follow and we watch them evolve that represent the different stages of the experience. And then, of course, looking at the technology, because Spark AR is very limited. It's running on Instagram, so our maximum file size is, I think it was 4 megabits, tiny. All the loops could only be 15 seconds long. So there's a challenge for you. Do something that's cool, that blow everybody's mind. You got 15 seconds, go. So we're looking at these key components and starting to say, okay, how does this come together? How do we have this progression and this evolution? I'll show you kind of where we landed. I'll start by showing you a layout. But this is the result. I want to emphasize this is the result of a lot of discussions of how things work. So the first thing that we have is a tech check. Because if you think about technology, the first thing that you want to do is take technology out of the picture for an experience, right? And it's new, maybe people don't understand, like you have to be at a certain distance to trigger it and step off. So we took that and we created a tech check area where everybody made sure we had the latest version of Instagram, have the headphones on that are part of the experience, and are ready to go into the experience. The next thing that we did is set up this activate station, and this is all narratively wrapped, but everything is working on multiple levels, right? The functionality of what's happening, what needs to happen with the tech, and then what needs to happen with the psychology. And in this first section, it's important for us to teach everybody how to use the technology. So think about the human psychology. How do we learn? We learn by doing, right? We learn by actually trying things. And then how do we remember? We remember by doing it in repetition. So we're taking these psychological tricks and we wrap it into a narrative where the guest gets to experience the characters in a way that helps them learn. And then we move into more of our climactic stage where they experience it physically, tangibly, take the digital away. Here we've met them where they came in. 29 rooms, everybody has their phones out. Everybody's like getting that amazing picture that they're going to post. Great, we'll start where they are. We'll start where you are. Then we'll move into a sensory, tactile experience before releasing them into this world where the digital and the physical combine. So you can see we have a narrative arc to some degree, but it's supporting the psychological journey of our guests. So these are the characters, just to give you a quick look. Eclipse, which is driven by light, mimicry, driven by biomimicry, alchemy, and powder. And powder, if anybody's working in volumetric and checking out the volumetric, you know how incredible it can be. We actually brought a volumetric capture into Spark AR. Again, 4 megabytes. We got volumetric into Spark AR. It was pretty wild. That's the nerd stuff in me that I love. Nobody else knew what was going on, but we're going to push some boundaries while we're at it. So what does this look like? These are some renderings that we did. You've got the outside where our tech check is happening, all before they go inside the experience. And then remember that activate room we were talking about? So here we have each of those characters in a different corner of the room, and we invite people to explore it and find the one that speaks to you. Make a connection. And they did, and they roamed around, and they stood in front of it, and then we said, okay, now bring its digital form to life. And the digital form, they would learn how to work it and make sure their sound is on and everything's happening, and it comes to life in this incredible way. I said, okay, find another one. See what you did not choose. They go to the next, and they go to the next, and they go to the next. We have repetition. We have them learning something. We have them gaining this part of the story. All intuitively built into the narrative. This is the middle piece where everybody comes together. Their little handles down here, and you can touch and feel. Put down the phones for a little bit, step away, experience it in a tactile space, and then they move through to transcend. I just wanted to show you this overview slide because, again, here we're dividing things out into what the intention is, what the function is. We're calling everything out that we're accomplishing, not just writing a script. And by the end of it, it comes to life, and over the course of 10 days and about 12,000 people, we're now at almost 2 million social impressions, direct social impressions. That's not expanded out into anything. But so you only have a couple thousand people coming through the room, but you're creating an experience that they want to share, that they want to put out there, that they connected with, that was easy for them to experience because we helped walk them through that experience every step of the way. So as we look towards the future, as we look towards how are we building, how are we creating something that isn't just taking what we're familiar with and trying to put it in a box on their head. I'd like to challenge everybody to step out of the mindset of the square mentality. The next time you use the word storytelling, the next time you think about, okay, yes, I'm going to create this 360 film, or just check yourself and say, is this what I really mean? Is this the kind of creation that I'm making? Because language is powerful. And the more we evolve our mindset, the more powerful our creations are going to be. And you remember Chester Carlton, right? Yeah, everybody that walked away, that is a multi-billion-dollar company now. For the people that took the risk and said, you know what? I think there's something here. I think that thinking different is going to lead me to creating something bigger and better. And one of the key parts of that is, even though right now I think our industry is filled with brilliant people, and I've worked with most of the people on this panel here, and I enjoy working with them, but to bring together, to take this to the next level, I really think our creators should look more like this. Yes, bring in that diversity, not just in culture, not just in gender, but in perspective. If you're a film writer, go out and have a conversation with the tech team. Like, intermingle. The strongest thing that you can do when you're moving into a world where you don't control the story anymore is to bring in other perspectives. It's only going to make you stronger. So I hope that this has been not a end of storytelling, dun dun dun, but an inspiration and something that you can take forward and implement and think about and consider. The questions that I've heard yesterday were incredible. I know I'm with an incredibly smart group of people right here. I'm so proud and so privileged, and I look forward to everything that you're going to build. Thank you.